They were actually supposed to have jailed Nnamdi Kanu on November 10th. But they realized at the last minute that it was Ken Saruwa's same day that they killed Ken Saruwa. Second, the sentence was supposed to be a death sentence. But because they could not get, the support they needed to carry it out, they decided to make it life. Omotosho, as of the time he went for a break to come and read the judgment, was still, what he had in his hand was a judgment for death sentence. If you see the passion with which he was reading the allegations against Nnamdi Kanu, one, the laborious and tedious way it was going, he didn't write the judgment. You can tell. You can tell from his demeanor and his action that this was too much. A lot of mistakes. He could have mentioned his name, he says everything properly. And secondly, when he went back, they had to have another meeting with him. He said, look, I don't think we can carry out the death sentence. And that was why they settled for life. And then they imprisoned him, they settled for life, and took him to Sokoto the next day. They spent $10 million to go and bring Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya for this sham trial. If you spend $50,000, you'll be able to get Toji. If you put $50,000 on the ground in Zamfara or Sokoto and say, I want to get Toji, I'm sure there are enough hunters with that money who will go and fish him out. But they are not interested because they are partners in crime, in the business of terrorism. Because the number one organization in this country is Nigerian government.
Omoyele Sowore has just dropped a political earthquake, a revelation shaking the very foundation of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's case. According to Sowore, what Nigerians witnessed on November 20th was not a judgment, not a judicial process, but a scripted performance. He alleged that the judgment had been written long before the court ever even sat, with two chilling options: death sentence or life imprisonment to Kanu. According to what Sowore said in this video, because we're going to watch it to the finish, Sowore claims that the original plan was to deliver the judgment on November 10th, a date that would have, tragically mirrored the execution of Ken Saruwa. But when the political tension became too hot, when the Free Mazi Nnamdi Kanu protests intensified, which he led, the government allegedly backed down from the death sentence. The script, he says, was quietly edited, shifted the judgment to November 20th, and replacing execution with life imprisonment. He goes further to allege that what was handed to Justice Omotosho wasn't a case file, it was a pure written judgment, and that the judge's visible stammering, in the words of Sowore, laborious reading of the script with a lot of mistakes, he struggled to pronounce Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's name during the ruling, was a crack in the script, a sign that he was reading what he did not or he never wrote. Well, myself, I actually observed this during the live stream because I live streamed the whole judgment. The stammering was just too much. Omotosho truly stumbled through the pronouncement. Then comes the most explosive claim. Sowore says the federal government spent $10 million to abduct Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya. Yet, these same authorities cannot flush out terrorists in Nigeria's forest. Why? Because, according to him, the government and the terror groups are partners in crime. Of course, he made commentary on some other issues to talk about the ambassadorial list, but let's watch this video to finish, then we'll come in with our analysis.
All right, you have earned the reputation as Nigeria's most fearless activist. When did you first realize speaking truth to power was a calling for you?
Well, I think I realized very early in life when I was confronted with the brutality of Nigerian state when I was 10 years old. My village was invaded by the people you call Mopol now, or the kill and go police, because of an altercation between them and the youths on Christmas Eve in 1980. So the brutality, the trauma, and the degradation we followed that night as a family, as a community, forced me into a space where I said to myself, perhaps there might be an opportunity in the future. If I live to be old enough to speak to the power, I will confront these people. That was 10 years old. Of course, that is the internalization of that decision. The externalization, of course, unraveled as I went to secondary school, where you had to confront teachers, principals, and then when I got to the university, I had to confront principalities. But that's how passionate I am about things that I stand strongly against.
You've also been in the forefront lately over the issue of Nnamdi Kanu,
Yes.
and they're very vocal at that. What was going through your mind or your reaction when Justice James Omotosho was reading that life imprisonment judgment on November 20th?
Nothing. You know why? Because as of November 5, I had explained in a long tweet on my page and on my social media handles exactly what was going to happen on November 20th. Two things were going to happen in November. They were actually supposed to have jailed Nnamdi Kanu on November 10th, but they realized at the last minute that it was Ken Saro-Wiwa's same day that they killed Ken Saro-Wiwa. Second, the sentence was supposed to be a death sentence, but because they could not get, the support they needed to carry it out, they decided to make it life. Omotosho, as of the time he went for a break to come and read the judgment, was still, what he had in his hand was a judgment for death sentence. If you see the passion with which he was reading the allegations against Nnamdi Kanu, one, the laborious and tedious way he was going, he didn't write the judgment. You could tell. You could tell from his demeanor and his action that this was too much. A lot of mistakes. He could have mentioned his name, he says everything properly. And secondly, when he went back, they have to have another meeting with him. They said, look, I don't think we can carry out the death sentence. And that was why they settled for life. And then they imprisoned him, they settled for life, and took him to Sokoto the next day. The fastest transfer of a prisoner. And it was to send a message to the people on whose behalf he was sentenced to life. Because nobody should deceive you. Nnamdi Kanu's offense has nothing to do with what they read as his charges. Some of those charges are dead. Some of them no longer, some of the laws on that which do not exist. Like the treason charge. You can't charge somebody for treason after 3 years of committing the offense. So they charged him almost 4 or 5 years after he committed the offense. Some of the charges restated had already been struck out. So it was just what they call trial and error. This offense is that he was asking for the breakup of the real estate called Nigeria. And the owners of Nigeria decided that, you don't do that. That's what is that offense the Christians talk about that is unforgivable it's an offense against the Holy Spirit. This is an offense against the holy oil in Nigeria. That was the reason why Ken Saro-Wiwa was, when you touch that area, they don't waste time, the owners of Nigeria. Then you've touched their economic life enough. They'll kill you immediately.
Have you been able to visit him in Sokoto?
I haven't, but I've had people who have visited that we've been in touch. I've been in touch with him in general, but I've not visited Sokoto yet. But you see what I was telling you when I was planning the protest for Nnamdi Kanu, which I believe also might have led, which I believe was the reason they didn't pronounce their penalty, because that was a lot of attention, and that was why they were upset with me and sent me to Kuje prison for 4 days over that. When we were planning all that, I was calling on all these Eastern governments to speak out. Now they've realized that it's even more burden on them that now become sentenced to death. That's why OT had to fly to Sokoto, maybe on a private jet, to go and visit Nnamdi Kanu. The judge is still going to go there and visit and apologize and confess. It happened to Fela. The judge who sentenced him, when Fela was there, he was sent to Maiduguri, Bama prison. The judge drove there from Lagos to go and apologize, wherever he was. The judge is still going to, Tinubu will still visit Nnamdi Kanu in prison. But we told them this was unnecessary. They could have saved themselves embarrassment on November 20th by just discharging him of just releasing him unconditionally. Because you could tell, how do you accuse somebody of killing Gulak when you have him in DSS custody? How did he do it? No evidence. The only evidence they have is a radio transmitter and microphone. I was looking for an evidence of, he went to buy a ship of weapons and sent to Nigeria. No, not even a bullet. Just exercise book where he wrote his thoughts, and where radio transmitter they claim he concealed and brought to Nigeria, and the microphone. That's all.
Why do you think his release is important to Nigeria?
Because Nigeria entered voluntarily into a disease in 1963, and to exit from it and heal itself, you must address the outcome of the Civil War. All of this thing you're saying is the outcome of the 1970 Civil War. And it's part of the reason why you say I'm active on this matter is not political. I didn't fight that in that war. when it was active, and I don't want to participate in fighting when it is cold. They're still waging a cold war against the Igbo man in Nigeria. I know it. I don't need to go to school to know that. I don't need to have a PhD in philosophy to know that Nigeria has an Igbo problem. But it would be hypocritical on my side to fight and speak on behalf of Palestinians when Israel is shelling them, and forget to fight on behalf of our local Palestinians in the southeast where Nigerian government is shelling them. That would be hypocrisy on my part.
How do you respond to claims that activism is funded by some quarters to create a false sense of opposition?
I'm very happy that people can have opinions about me that they can put out there. That makes them feel good. But if you want to do an activism that is creating a false sense of opposition, go and put your younger brother out there and then shoot him, and you finish burying him and you continue your activism. Be expelled from the university twice. Let your nose be broken. Let your mother have stroke because they detain you for a long period of time. Let your passport be seized and you can't see your children for 5 years and you have to be with your wife. Be shot at, let them go after you everywhere you go. So, and then we can all come to a place where we say, we have created another activist who created a false sense of opposition. I'm not trying to be an opposition. See, what people should differentiate between activism, as you call it, and opposition is cyclical in Nigeria. People only oppose the government when they're out of government, when they don't have something to eat, and they will oppose the government. I don't belong in that category. And then what happens to activists all over the world is that a narrative is framed to scandalize you, right? And some people will believe it. So when you get to a point as an activist at my level, you don't even respond to that, because then you get distracted responding to what they call hubris. At the end, the person who says, you want to create real opposition so that the ones that are false can pack and go home. So, but I understand that a person respects rights for people to have freedom of opinion, and I cannot tell you that anybody who says that has no right to say what he wants to say. Everybody should have a right to say that. That's the kind of country I'm fighting for, where you have a right to say what you want to say, and you are still free after you have said that.
Let's talk about revolution now.
Yes.
What exactly are you calling Nigerians to revolt against?
If there's anybody who's asking that question about this time, I have nothing to tell them. If Nigeria should be revolting against everything, I hate to say that, but I can't fail to tell you that every country that I've been to outside of Nigeria, and I've been to 31 countries beside Nigeria, and the question I ask myself is, what is wrong with us? And the question, the citizens of most countries that I've been to, the moment you introduce yourself to them, that you're a Nigerian, they ask you two questions. One of it is that, where's that footballer? They always have a favorite footballer. JJ Okocha is the most popular that I come across. And the second thing is, why are you guys not revolting against your leaders? You have such a great country, but you have foolish leaders, you have crazy leaders. I'm telling you what outsiders tell me. They tell me in South Africa, you go to Ghana, they'll tell you. And in fact, some of the reasons why Nigerians are hated abroad, apart from those who are accused of being too nice to their women and their women fall in love with them, because they say Nigerian men are very good in taking care of women. So there's that animosity I'm talking. But the second reason most Africans hate Nigerians is that they love Nigeria to the point that they can't understand why Nigeria is not a great place. Yes. Because they love your football, they love your culture, they live off of your music, their life is dependent on your movies, their spirituality is controlled by your clerics, right? And then they will have to wake up and hear that you don't have water, running water. You don't have electricity. They can't travel to your country to go and say, I don't know how many Africans, I'm not saying Europe, I don't know how many Africans are saying, I wish I can go to Nigeria. I heard so much about Nigeria. How is it? But they'll tell you, but they said, you can't go there. They'll kidnap you. So Nigeria, if you have a child born abroad, you can ask anybody in diaspora. The only way to get your child to behave properly is to say, I'm taking you to Nigeria. I said, at the place, what do you want me to do? I don't want to go to Nigeria. I'll do it. Which other country do you use to threaten your children like that? Your children offends you, like, I'm taking you to Nigeria. I said, no, please, daddy. Please. I don't want to go to Nigeria. And they've never been before. It's just based on what they've heard from their classmates. But good news is that there's something that is not related to government that keeps them going. My son plays soccer and he's focused on Osimhen. It's like that, did you see what Osimhen played? I don't even watch soccer that much. But you can't talk to my son about politics. He doesn't want to hear it because that's the traumatic part of Nigeria that affects him directly. His father is constantly hounded for going, being a citizen of Nigeria. He's aware, but he has found a way to please himself with something Nigerian, which is soccer. Some have adopted Nigerian skit makers, they've adopted movie makers, musicians. People talk about all these young, great musicians. They have fans all over the world. They're doing well. Nigeria has almost replaced the entire musical genre around the world. Afrobeat, or whatever Afro they call it, is popular everywhere, even in the Nordic region. You go to Norway, you go to Nigeria, Sweden, the concert is filled up. It doesn't matter if it's Burna Boy or Flavor or Davido or Wizkid. But who wants to come to Nigeria to do a concert? Probably not many.
The president has just sent 32 names, in addition to 3 other names he sent as ambassadorial nominees to the Senate for immediate confirmation. And there have been divergent opinions regarding composition of that list. What's your own reaction on the list?
You see, I have a problem with Nigerians. Sometimes we major too much on what should not bother us. Why is anybody upset that Tinubu appointed useless people as ambassador? You get my point? Because they're all in the same WhatsApp group. What are you upset with that Tinubu appointed Reno Omokre or Panika? Who do you want him to appoint?
Yakub Mahmoud.
Yakub Mahmoud. He's appointing people of his genre. He appointed a guy who helped him rig election. What do you expect? He appointed a guy who helps him with propaganda, telling lies. He appointed a guy who helps him do other things. That is where they pick from their group. So I don't understand the outrage. If it was the Pope that did that, then you can be worried that why did the Pope, appoint a prostitute to head a Catholic mission, right? We can debate that, but we're talking about Tinubu now. So why is everybody upset that Tinubu appointed these people? Who do you expect him to appoint? It has to be people of his own genre, his people of the same characteristics. Yes, it's the reason why I haven't said anything about this, because sometimes I have to call myself to order when I get overly excited about people appointed. Why should you appoint this? Well, the question is, why don't you focus on the person who appointed these characters?
So Nnamdi Kanu is in Sokoto prison.
What did we predict to you? That they would do that? Well, I also predicted that it would be the greatest mistake of their life. And now, the people we asked to protest to prevent Nnamdi Kanu from going to jail are all rushing to Sokoto. I want his family members to give me the right to admit people to see him, so that I can be screening them. And I'll tell you the day the judge who sentenced him is going to go to Sokoto. He's going to go beg like Fela was begged in Bama prison for doing what is wrong, if he has not done that already. But if he wants to go, tell him to contact me. I will arrange the safe passage to Sokoto. This was the worst thing they could have done to them. When they were taking him to Sokoto, they thought they would ridicule him. When they got to Sokoto, he has turned Sokoto to another Mecca.
Yes, privilege.
That's what we predicted. They don't have sense because they don't have people who can reason in government. And now, look at where we are. You jailed Nnamdi Kanu. Nnamdi Kanu is already a celebrity in prison. They said he has already become the president of the prison, but I doubt that is what Nnamdi Kanu wanted. But it must have been conferred on him just by respect, So very soon, you will see that they will, on their own, reverse the most fundamental mistake they ever made regarding Nnamdi Kanu. You can quote me on that.
So what do you have to say? The judge has ruled that you should be restrained from talking about some issues that incite the public against the government of the day.
Don't misquote the judge. You just said that he was talking about national security. I'm not the national security.
Yes.
I'm not a police officer.
Yes.
You also heard me tell the judge that we have a plan to defeat the candidate on the other side. And I will continue to make public policy statements. It's all right. I think we have to give it to the judge that he applied wisdom.
So Aniu Ribadu has been seen of late talking about the safety of the abducted. He was even reassuring the families of the victims that their children are well and safe while in captivity. Doesn't that speak of?
Well, what Nuhu Ribadu has come to tell you is that he's the new chief negotiator with the terrorists. So, and that's probably what Tinubu appointed him to be doing now. What they are doing is empowering the terrorists. And it is because they have no capacity to disempower them. So they engage. If nobody can tell you that they're in good hands, they said, and they are safe where they are, then come and redefine to me the meaning of safety. If a child who is barely 15 to 16 years is not in school and not with their parents, they are not safe. There's nobody who is safe in the hands of deranged kidnappers, terrorists, or bandits. No.
As always, this is Omoyele Sowore igniting the political space once again. And this time, the explosion lands squarely on the Nnamdi Kanu's case. In a revelation that sounds like the plot of a political thriller, Sowore alleged that the judgment passed on Nnamdi Kanu wasn't born in the courtroom. It was written long before the judge ever appeared, when the case was actually reassigned to him from Bintanyako. And what he reveals next may be the clearest indication that yet this story is far from over, and perhaps finally a ray of hope for Nnamdi Kanu. This is actually a good news. I mean, when you watch people analyze the Kanu's trial, the judgment, people get enthusiastic because it is obvious that Nnamdi Kanu is politically held. So Omoyele Sowore did not mince words. In a stunning disclosure, he claimed that Nnamdi Kanu's judgment had already been scripted, sealed, and delivered to Justice Omotosho before the court session even began. According to Sowore, the original date for the judgment was November 10th, a chilling coincidence with the execution date of Ken Saro-Wiwa. And on that day, the alleged script was a death sentence. But you know, the Nigerian politics, the pressure was too much. The political tension was boiling. These people are very, very much afraid. They are scared. The streets were relentless, and the Free Nnamdi Kanu protests, which Sowore himself led, made the government realize they would not, get the public support needed to carry out such an execution. So the date shifted to November 20th, and the script was quietly rewritten from death sentence to life imprisonment. Sowore alleged that what was handed to Justice Omotosho was not a case file, not evidence, not legal argument, but a pre-written judgment with two options, death or life imprisonment. And he insists that this is the reason Omotosho struggled to pronounce Nnamdi Kanu's name during the ruling. He was reading a judgment he did not author, a judgment he never initiated. He has no idea of how it was written. So he didn't stop there. He claimed the federal government spent over $10 million to abduct Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya, yet cannot flush terrorists from Nigerian forest. When he was asked about how his activism began, Sowore gave a surprising answer at the age 10. He narrated how on Christmas Eve in 1980, when he witnessed the brutality of a Nigerian mobile police against youth in his community, that trauma, he said, forced him into confronting those in power. And truly, his life confirms it. From the days of MK Abiola, through military regimes, through campus battles where he confronted what he called principalities, Sowore has remained on the front line. And here's my honest reflection. If Sowore were Igbo, with the level of confrontation he has engaged since 1980, as he claims, he might not be alive today. And that is not bias. That is Nigeria's reality. But despite his decades of activism, Nigeria remained trapped in the same cycle. So the question is, when exactly will Nigeria change? When Sowore was asked why he stands with Nnamdi Kanu, he made it clear. He says that, as always, he quotes as always that Nigeria has an Igbo problem. And this, he says, is partly why he has remained vocal about Nnamdi Kanu's case. He even revealed that he predicted exactly how the judgment would go and wrote about it before it happened. And the court delivered exactly what he predicted. I mean, he actually wrote about the judgment on his handle. According to him, most charges against Nnamdi Kanu were frivolous, were dead. Many had been struck out, and others were based on laws that had already been repealed by the time the alleged offenses were actually committed by Nnamdi Kanu. So the question is simple. If the charges didn't stand, then why wouldn't Nnamdi Kanu be outraged in court? Why wouldn't Nnamdi Kanu be unruly in court? Why wouldn't Nnamdi Kanu challenge a judge he believes was reading a political script? Here on Abel Perspectives, I report things as they are, raw, unfiltered, unbiased. And the truth is this: injustice against one Nigerian can become injustice against anyone. So when he was thrown a question of when he's visiting Nnamdi Kanu in prison, so we responded that Nnamdi Kanu is now a celebrity prisoner, deeply respected by inmates and officers in Sokoto. He says even Fulanis, Hausas, and other people of all tribes honor him. He insists that eventually President Tinubu will be forced to even visit Nnamdi Kanu in prison. Justice Omotosho will be forced to apologize and, of course, go to prison to either publicly or privately apologize to Nnamdi Kanu. Now, turning to Tinubu's controversial ambassadorial list. Of course, we talked about it in our previous video about the list, and some reactions from Nigerians and some both diplomat and both former diplomat and present ones, which featured names like Reno Mokri, Fani Kayode, and others. Sowore said Nigerians should not be surprised that Tinubu appointed people who reflect him, and according to Sowore, there was nobody better he could have appointed. On Reno Mokri, Sowore was blunt. He said Reno praises Tinubu because he needed a job and he has gotten one. Conclusively, Nigeria sits on a tipping point. If the system can do this to Nnamdi Kanu, a public figure, imagine what can happen to the ordinary citizen. This is why we must speak. This is why we must stay awake. This is why we must demand justice. Because if Nigeria has no Nigerians tomorrow, then what will be left? That is the end of the story. And as the dust settles on Sowore's revelations, one truth stands unshaken. Nigeria is sitting on a buried truth. And every day, that truth pushes closer. Looking at the things Sowore is saying, the judgment on Nnamdi Kanu wasn't just a court ruling. It was an attempted political execution that failed only because the people refused to be silent. But here's the real shocker. This story is not over, not even close, because a government that scripts judgment, a system that stammers through injustice, a country that spends $10 million to abduct a man who is just asking for, the betterment of the entity called Nigeria, but cannot fight terrorists, is a country standing on a broken foundation. And broken foundations eventually collapse loudly. So if they think the Nnamdi Kanu matter is buried, they are wrong. They are very, very wrong. Because the ground is shaking, the people are awake. People are asking questions. Eyes are watching. And history is already taking notes. For now, Kanu sits in a prison cell in Sokoto, a celebrity prisoner, as Sowore called him. But the real prisoners are those who fear the truth. Nigeria must decide, will it choose justice or will it keep running from a future it cannot escape? Whatever the answer becomes, one thing is very clear. The story of Nnamdi Kanu will definitely shake this nation again. And when it does, nowhere will be quiet. As always, this is Abel Perspectives, your domain for unfiltered news and the raw political analysis. In this space, we handle every reportage the way they are, no bias, no emotion. As it is, we give it to the audience. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like this video, give it a share, of course, smash the subscribe button and turn on the notification so you would always get notified anytime we drop an update. And most importantly, don't forget to leave your comment. As I do say, your commentary is your personal opinion, and that gives us a side to democracy. Thank you for watching.